Hello, welcome to another video on the Scouring Early Access. Today's video is going to be a guide on all of the buildings in the game, pretty much all the buildings for the humans, and all the buildings of the orcs, and the two neutral buildings they can capture in the game. And first, we're going to be talking about the different amount of space on top of human buildings and orc buildings, and I guess whatever kind of space on these outposts as well. But the single building that both orcs and humans have that have the same exact space is the human guard tower and the orc guard tower. And as we can see here, you can have a maximum of 4 archers on a guard tower, or you can have an archer and a cannon, or you can have about 3 swordsmen on top of a guard tower. And so you can see here, 4 archers, an archer and a cannon, and 3 warriors, which is balanced and pretty fair because they have a cost the same amount of money and wood to make, so that's the only balance between these two races. And here's where it becomes a little different. Not exactly sure why, but here it is. The human barracks can only have a maximum of 8 archers, you can see here, but the orc barracks can have about 11 archers on top of the barracks, even though both the orc and the human barracks cost the exact same amount of resources, which can feel a little, I guess, unfair or a bit annoying. But I guess the only advantage that human barracks has is that it has less space on their barracks. So if someone's going to be attacking with a lot of warriors or swordsmen, then you can fill up your roof with all the swordsmen around 5, and it's going to be fully safe from any attacking swordsmen. They're going to be climbing here. It's going to get destroyed very easily. There's a little, I guess, mechanic where if you have a packed barracks full of swordsmen, then any attacking swordsmen are going to be losing very decisively. So I guess that way the humans have a small advantage. I'm not exactly sure what to say about that, but slightly easier to defend against mass warriors with your own warriors. So here you can see the orc barracks can have about 8 warriors, and so this means that if an enemy takes over your barracks, you can very quickly destroy your enemy barracks. There's more units breaking it compared to human barracks. It's going to take a little longer to break, but I guess somewhat minor, not really, I guess, that important, because if the enemy is already at your base, then you're pretty much going to have a hard time defending your buildings. But of course this gives a huge advantage to the orcs. You can put a lot of archers on here, or even a lot of workers, when you're defending your own main base. And yes, but the only, I guess, disadvantage is that if you have more archers here, then the enemies can use artillery to just destroy more archers or more units in total, compared to blasting away a human roof. But anyways, here you can see 8 archers, 11 orc archers here in the barracks. And up here you can see the human barracks can only have 2 archers and a maximum of 2 cannons. There's no more space for anything else. But an orc barracks can have about 4 cannons, which can be very nice when holding a specific choke point. But from my experience, only the front 2 cannons are gonna reliably fire in one direction. But if there's enemies from many different directions, then a orc barracks can work really well to allow all your cannons to fire. And pretty much how to do the math between how many cannons you can put on top of your buildings is roughly maximum amount of archers, so 8 right here, and each cannon is roughly 3 archers, so you delete 3 and then 3 more, and then you have 2 archers left. So that's how we get to this 2 archer and 2 cannon, this maximum capacity over here. But anyways, the fort, you can see, basically has the exact same space that a normal orc barracks has. So it's going to be entirely identical. So 11 archers over here, and then 11 archers on this tier 2 town hall or fort. And it's going to have a maximum of 4 cannons here, similar to the orc barracks, 4 cannons, and a maximum of 8 swordsmen on this fort. So exactly identical to an orc barracks of 8 warriors here. And for the tier 2 orc house, the bastion, you can see here maximum of 15 orc archers, which can be very effective and useful when defending your base against big attacks. And we can see they can kind of shoot across their, I guess, their whole town hall with pretty much no issues. So that can be very annoying, especially for the humans who can only shoot from 3 directions here, but not across this little wide angle. It's going to be extremely frustrating, and which can lead you to not want to play humans, I would say. Anyways, over here goes for 15 archers here, but 11 archers for tier 2 human house, 4 cannons on a tier 2 house, but around 5 cannons on a orc tier 2 house, and then 8 swordsmen on a tier 2 human house, but this is around 11 warriors on a tier 2 house. And of course, just like with other orc buildings, the more space for your warriors, then the faster they can destroy this house compared to a human building, because they have the same exact armor and health. So I can feel a little strange. Anyways, over here, the castle, the first big platform, or I guess this is the first building castle, which is gonna have more space in total compared to the orc version. And so pretty much the barracks and the bastion will have more space compared to the human barracks and fort. The castle will have more space than a orc citadel. And over here, basically you can see there should be 21, I believe, space of archers. Yeah, I can see this little archer. So there's 21 archers on the first platform. And on the second platform, there's around 9 archers worth of space, which can be very, yes, effective when fighting huge armies, but it does of course mean that artillery can destroy them a little easier. And citadel version, you can see here, basically to simply explain it, is that this big upper part is very similar to a bastion, but see here there's 15 archers, but over here there's only a maximum of 14 for some reason. Not exactly sure why. There's a little difference. And over here, this is a similar platform to a human barracks, but a human barracks has 11 archer maximum, but this one has 7 archers. So it's a little similar. So this is basically like a bastion amount of space. This is like a human barracks amount of space here. So overall, the castle has more space, 21 archers compared to the 14 here, and then 9 archers on this small platform compared to the 7. So technically, in the early mid game, orcs have an advantage on their roofs, but the humans only have an advantage at tier 3, you could say. Anyways, over here, the amount of cannons you can get on a small platform, it's around 7 cannons, and then 3 cannons on top. And of course, the little amount of space left is 3 cannons on a small platform and a single archer, and then 7 cannons and a single archer, which can be very useful for your cannons to blast very far away. But this big platform is auto lower, so it can be auto more difficult for your cannons to properly fire everywhere. So they're gonna have difficulties firing to the right here. So I guess most of the time, roughly 3 or half of these cannons are not gonna be firing at anything because there's other cannons in front of them. Anyways, over here, the Arc Bastion, you can see here, has the same amount of cannons, 5 cannons, and then 5 cannons over here. And then similar to the human barracks, 2 cannons and 2 archers. You can see here, 2 cannons and 2 archers. So this works somehow. It's copy and pasted Bastion and human barracks. Why if it's pure archers? And that's how I don't really understand why it's 14 archers on top instead of 15, and then 7 instead of 8. Anyways, over here, the final little difference. You can have about 15 swordsmen on this small platform, and you can have 6 swordsmen on this smaller platform. So 15 and 6. Over here, you can have around 5 on a small platform, and then I guess around 10, 3, 6, and 10, yeah. So you can have roughly 5 more swordsmen on a human castle compared to this, so only 10. And this is pretty much similar to a human, whatever you call it, barracks. So 5 swordsmen maximum, just like here. Here you can see this little difference again, where it's 11 maximum warriors on a bastion. But here you can only have 10 warriors, so it's a little different. And that's pretty much most of the differences between their buildings here, you can see. So orcs are mostly favored because they're tier 2, can fire very reliably, pretty much almost anywhere, compared to a fort, which roughly, yes, a quarter of it can't really fire in this one direction to the right. But up here you can see there's some blocking stones here. They can sometimes block your cannons from firing, but this is usually from units being a little too close. That's when they're not going to be able to fire. But if they're far away, then they're going to have very few issues, which is not comparable to a fort, which they can't fire at all in this direction. So this building can be a little frustrating and not really helpful in the fun. And I guess also this part as well. In this direction, your cannons can't really fire through this little tower, so it can be also a little annoying. Anyways, over here we're gonna go to the outpost in Dark Tower version. Over here, it's somewhat similar to a human barracks, so you can have around 8 archers here, but on an outpost you can have around 9 archers, which is a little, I guess, also a little difference. And here you can have around 3 cannons instead of 2 cannons. So it can also be very useful at certain choke points to just have this defense. And over here you can see you can have about 6 swordsmen on top here, which can be very useful to hold off goblin waves, or to just, I guess, hold off against all the swordsmen trying to climb up here. And over here, the Dark Tower can have about 11 archers, which is basically almost copy and pasted, whatever you call it, from Orc Barracks amount of limit, or amount of space or whatever. You can have 11 archers, and you can have 11 archers on top of the Dark Tower. And here, you can have around 4 cannons as well, just like the Orc Barracks over here. It's also the maximum amount of cannon space, which can be somewhat useful. And over here you can see you can have around 8 warriors on top here. And we're gonna see here. around 8 warriors. Gonna try to go on top here. So I can see it is entirely identical to, I guess, orc barracks, pretty much. So, orc barracks, dark tower, have the exact same amount of space. Alright, and over here we're going to be testing out to see how many ladders that each of the buildings has. So you pretty much will know how many ladders that can be put up for all the buildings they can climb in a game. First building, the dark tower, you can see you can only have around 2 warriors climb it at a time. But of course these are very long ladders, so they're going to be taking a while to climb up, and they can be easily target fired. And over here, the outpost only has enough space for 1 ladder, so this can be very difficult to take over with just pure warrior spam. I'm gonna spawn a few more warriors. Over here you can see the barracks of the humans can be climbed by about 3 warriors, which is a little interesting because it has less space. But you can see here, when you're climbing on top of a orc barracks, there's only 2 ladders, but there's more space here, so that kind of doesn't make sense to me, because I would expect the orc barracks to have 3 ladders maximum, because it has more space, compared to the human one, who has a maximum of 3 ladders. So basically this is also a big disadvantage to the humans, because basically with 1 little attack you can take over half the barracks with 1 climb, but with orc barracks you only need around, I guess I would say around 4 climbs. So 1 climb, 2 climb, and then 3 climbs, 4, to finally fill up a whole barracks. So that can be also a bit of a disadvantage between the humans and orcs. And of course here, the little mechanic where if you climb up a building, you'll usually go down from the little door of the building. And you can see again both dark towers have the same 2 ladders on them. But you can see here, the orc guard tower, you come out the bottom right part of the building. But for the humans, you come out from the top right part of the building. I can show you here. You can see they're running from the top right. So this can be very important to know sometimes. You know, if you can run away with your units, so you can shimmy your way through the top or through the bottom of the orc building. Spawn some more units. Over here you can see you can climb this bastion. Roughly 4 ladders. And so this is quite identical to the human fort, because it also has 4 ladder maximum. But of course the fort has less space, so it can be a little taken over a little faster. But the bastion has more space, so it can be destroyed a little faster when climbed up without the enemy noticing. Now here, a little final building, we're gonna see the orc citadel, which of course has a bit less space than a castle. But here you can see it has 2 ladders, which is a lot less, and so it can be a little easier to defend citadel against swordsman spam, because you can just have your own 5 swordsmen on top of this little platform, and then any other swordsmen are going to have a very difficult time to go on top here because of these other swordsmen blocking them, for example. But over here, the castle for the humans. It has the exact same amount of ladders as a fort, so around 4. But here we can see it can be a little disadvantageous because how it works is that the little hatches here is where units are actually going to be spawning when they're transferring from these little doors. In this corner door, they're going to spawn on top here. And on the bottom, they're going to spawn through this little hatch if they want to go outside. So that's going to be a little disadvantageous because, for example, we're going to, for example, go over here, try to capture this port. But the door is over here in the back, so if you want to try to run away, you're going to have difficulties doing that because they're going to have to go through this little door. But I think this is a neutral port, so that's why it's not really showing it, so I'm going to show it in a little bit. Alright, and over here you can see that when you climb the little port, for example, your swordsmen are going to be on the outside parts here. And to get out of a building, they're going to have to go through this little door. And if you tell them to run home or outside a building, you can see they can sometimes be stuck and not able to go through the door. So sometimes it's more important to just let your swordsmen fight to their death instead of trying to micro them out and then seeing that they're going to be stuck here, then dying anyways. Same thing for this castle here. For example, these 3 swordsmen are going to be climbing on top here. If you want to run away, then they're going to be blocked by all these units, so it's better just let them fight to the death. And of course, similar to here, if this swordsman wants to run away, he has to go through this little hatch. So sometimes units can block you, and then you want to be aware of where your units are, or where they're going to be popping out through these little doors of the castle, or the citadel door here on the right. Of course, you have to climb this little stair here, up and down. And so if your units are on an edge here, they're not going to be able to run away because all these other units blocking them. So you want to keep that in mind when someone's attacking you. You want to run your units outside of a building, or if you're the one attacking with your swordsman, know that you can't really run away sometimes. Alright, and over here I'm going to be showing how well the archers and the cannons can shoot from each of the buildings, all the human buildings and orc buildings, to, I guess, compare how well they can be when they're used defensively. Anyways, over here, you can see swordsmen can run around relatively well, and archers have no issues shooting him, and he's relatively far away. But of course, when you get pretty close to the building, that is when some of them tend to be doing arcing shots. You can see here somehow on the top right part of the barracks, we have no issue shooting him. But on the bottom right, they do. But here they don't. On the bottom left. On the top right, they do. So I guess it's a little interesting. You can always target fire any units in the front here, or even over here as well. I didn't even know. See now the fort, which is of course the most disgusting building known to the community because of how useless it can be. So we can start here. Start going around here. So it is relatively similar to a barracks on its 3 sides of a fort, or whatever you call it. Right about here, I guess you can see there's one about more than half of them can't even shoot towards this direction to the north, and pretty much all of them can't shoot directly in this angle. Now all the way until here, we're going to start shooting across. So relatively this area, archers can't even shoot at directly, which is very terrible because any archers here, you just walk around and nothing's going to be happening to them. So you can just park your archers here and just shoot all these units here. And if the enemy tries to walk out, try and shoot you, then you can just target fire them. Your group of archers here. Anyways, we're going to continue this a little bit. So you can see you can fire relatively well for, I guess, 3/4 of the whole range. But when we get close, you can see here, only a few of them can shoot at the front. And so way more of them can shoot when they're more, I guess, this sort of corner, more directly. Interesting. So you can very directly shoot them when they're on the top left part. Just a little strange why these little differences. Anyways, let's go to the castle here. Just gonna start shooting him. Here you can see it's not relatively that far. All the archers have enough, I guess, normal range to shoot them. But right over here, I guess, you can see all these archers are gonna start having issues. It's from this little angle to even shoot at any units. So I guess let's say over here. So you can see how terrible this building can be as well a little bit. So most of the archers not going to be firing here, but I guess all of these archers are on top and have free reign to shoot here. So roughly this area can't be shot at by all these archers in the back. You see, somewhere around here. See, like over here, so pretty big. But even still, for these archers on top, when you get this close, they kind of start becoming useless a little bit. So only when you're hugging the building, you see these archers can be very useless. And even over here, you can see you can only shoot him really well when he's right at the gate, which is a little strange, I guess. Everywhere around here, they can't really shoot him really well. So I guess roughly at this corner here, they can shoot him really well, even if it's kind of close. And at this little gate entrance, so I guess a little interesting. Anyways, up here you can check the archeries on the guard towers. They're identical to the orc guard tower as well. So we have maximal amount of firing power, I guess. They're always going to be firing. Even when they're hugging a building, it's pretty much 100% chance for them to have a direct line of sight. Now here you can check the guard tower, dark tower. Yeah, pretty wide range. And these little things are not going to be blocking them from shooting. And so only when units are going to be coming to the front, you're going to have some issues shooting them. But when units are going to be climbing on top of these ladders, make a control group and then easily target fire them to death. Anyways, let's see the orc buildings. Let's start with the barracks. And of course there's more archers here, so this can also be a little big advantage for the orcs. You can see, just like the human barracks, they have relatively no issues. They have medium range around their whole barracks. Unless, of course, there's some trees blocking them or other buildings. Over here you can see can somewhat half of them shoot them when they're at the front. So this one's a bit more balanced, I guess. So roughly at each side of a barracks, roughly half the barracks can shoot them directly. Compared to over here, where it's only on the bottom left, we can shoot directly at the top right part of the barracks. Anyways, let's see over here, the Bastion, the most big difference for the humans and orcs. You can see here, these little stone pillars don't do anything to block the shots of the archers. And so they'll have non-existent issues. You can see they're even shooting through the stones. So this can feel very disgusting and unfair when you're fighting against an orc who can use their whole bastion to destroy all of your archers around their whole bastion. But the humans can't even shoot through a quarter of their whole side of the fort, which can be very unfair. Anyways, over here, gonna go in the front. So roughly all the archers on the edges are the ones that can fire really well. So very similar. Actually, over here we can see more than half of them can actually fire very directly at a unit at this sort of corner position, which is also interesting. I didn't even know this. And so yeah, this is extremely unfair, and this might be a big reason why we probably shouldn't play as the humans. Anyways, over here, final building, Bastion. See how well the archers do here. You can see a relatively medium range. They can fire without any issues. And I guess only around here is on the bottom platform. Can't really fire at you. But it's not as much of a big deal, I would say, compared to the castle, where most of the archers here can't really fire through this side of the castle, as we saw before. So more of them can fire compared to only 9 here. All 14 of these guys can fire. And over here you can see it's mostly open, direct firing here, but these 2 stones can sometimes block them. And so I guess roughly this area is kind of smaller than the castle, that archers have difficulties having direct shots. So because of this little stone pillar. So you can see it's a very small area, maybe this small, where the top archers can't really shoot, but of course these ones on the bottom can directly shoot someone. Anyways, let's see a bit closer. You can see this top left corner. It's very terrible for the orc, where they can't shoot anything here, or even the entire top to left part. But it's very similar to the castle here as well. You're very close, so it does make sense. Or I guess it is a little different, where a few archers can shoot here, or I guess at this point, as we remember, in this other corner. So on this top half of the orc citadel, you can't really shoot, but when it gets to the front here, at the front, you can see pretty much all of these boys are directly slaughtering anything that's very directly at the front here, which can of course be very good for target fire. Any swordsmen, they're going to be trying to climb your citadel here. And so even here, for the citadel and castle difference, the citadel is still somewhat a little more useful. Because of course, where you're going to be climbing, it's going to be very huge amount of firepower here compared to the archers here, where probably half of these guys are not going to be able to directly snipe these swordsmen that are going to be climbing up here. I guess, yeah. Outpost also had no issues. They can directly fire at him. And even if someone's very close to the front here, you can see roughly more than half of them can kind of target fire him as they're going to be climbing up. So it was also very defensive and useful building. Even over here you can see only half of them are firing. But behind the building, they can even fire even more effectively at this corner. So interesting to know. Or in this corner. So there you have it. That's all the little tests we did of the archers. And now the next part I'm going to be showing is all of the range of the cannons, or with the cannons firing. Alright, and over here I'm going to be showing the firing arcs, all the cannons, I guess, on all the buildings. So might as well start with the human cannons. You can see they can clearly fire, but of course they can sometimes block each other. But usually we can see they can fire with mostly no issues. But of course when it gets pretty close, they tend to have a harder time to fire. So roughly this far away, they can fire effectively. And if the enemies are too close, then they're going to struggle a little bit. So that's why if someone gets too close, it's usually more effective to just siege your units. That way your cannons can actually fire more effectively. Now here we're going to see some shots from the orc barracks. We can see even though there's more cannons here, they do tend to block each other. Sometimes just not even fire. So I guess it can be some kind of advantage for the orcs. But it's going to be mostly in high range, or when units are very far. See here, most of them are firing. So that's where most of the advantage can lie, when you're firing units that are far away. But of course, as we can see here, the bastion and the fort, it is still better to play as orc, because you can actually fire effectively. You can see here, nothing's really blocking it from firing. So when you're defending, an orc can actually blast you away. Unlike the human version, where they're going to have a harder time with shooting your units. See over here, you get roughly around here, cannons can't really fire. Or I guess around this direction. And so the enemy can just, of course, place their archers there. Just start blasting you away. But of course, like any other building, units are too close, and all of your cannons are going to be just useless on top. See the castle and citadel. can see here, you can clearly fire. You know, this little stone pillar can sometimes block your cannons from firing. Just like right there. But overall, they can fire relatively freely. You can see here, you're ready to fire. And even with these rocks, there's someone blocking here, but this little part of the citadel, which means they can still fire all this area here. See the castle. You can see there's a lot more cannons here, but of course, mostly the cannons that are closer to the edge of the building are the ones that are going to be firing. But of course, when the cannons are on the very top of this castle, they're going to be most effective at firing at very far targets. As we can see here, pretty far. But of course, the castle has a big disadvantage, where the cannons can somewhat not fire. And of course, half of them are not firing here. And then only 3 of them can fire most of the time. So that's why the castle can be a little worse than a citadel. Because most of these cannons are just going to be blocking each other from actually firing. Or just pushing each other around. So half the cannons are not going to be firing most of the time. Which is a little annoying. So once again, Citadel is a better building overall. And here you can see the Dark Tower can have 4 cannons on here. And they can fire very far. Let's see here. Can fire this far away, even though, see here, the maximum area is way farther away compared to a siege cannon. So these cannons have a bit higher range of fire. It's roughly this much more range. So that's why you do want to place your cannons on top of high ground buildings. But of course here, this is the Dark Tower. And it's going to be a little harder to hit any units that come too close. Roughly around here. You can see not too far from the building, and they're having issues firing all at the same time. So they're all useful around medium range. And of course, the cannon on the guard tower is the most efficient, because it can fire mostly uninterrupted across this whole range. And so these are most effective strategies. Try and make auto guard towers, place auto cannons on them, and the cannons are just going to be blasting away. You can see here, units are very close, and it's still able to fire relatively up close. So there you go. Oh, there's also this outpost. You can see they also have a relatively free firing here. Not usually blocking each other, but I do sometimes tend to stop each other from firing. And of course, when the units are very close, you have issues firing. So it's relatively useful to use your cannons on top. When units are too close, you want to somewhat siege them on the bottom. But overall, we can still see this big imbalance with the bastion. Your cannons can fire entirely around here. But if you're a human, can't even fire this part of the base, so then all of your cannons are going to be useless. And of course, the citadel has a wider shooting range. All of this stuff here, and even at the front. So we have a small blind spot over here, and a tiny one from this little pillar, in comparison to all these cannons not being able to fire. Their enemies are over here, or even if they're somewhat close here, only the cannons at the front can fire at them. And so there we have it. So those differences, and I guess this should help you choose to play Orc more often. Anyways, if you liked the video, you can leave a like, leave a comment. If you want to see more videos on the Scouring Early Access, then you can subscribe. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.